Well, hey, everybody, welcome to the Seeing Ability Podcast, where we're having a conversation about the world of people with disabilities. And that means we're going to be talking to parents who are raising kids, sometimes to adults who have disabilities themselves, as well as various people who are supporting this community. That might include educators, folks in healthcare, and folks in a variety of nonprofits. Now, first of all, I know you've got a lot of choices when it comes to podcasts, so I want to say thanks for tuning in. I think you're going to really enjoy our guest today because she kind of comes at this world from two distinct viewpoints, seeing this world from two lenses, if you will. And I won't spoil her story because I think you'll enjoy hearing it. But like all of our guests, we start out just talking as people. So we're going to do the Fast Four. First of all, Jackie, welcome to the podcast.
Hey.
Thanks for being here. The Fast Four is brought to us by my friends at Reliable Tech Help. So don't forget, for all your tech needs, call Reliable Tech Help. They're at 502-797-7399. First one on the Fast Four, tell us your favorite junk food.
My favorite junk food would have to be chips and like any kind of dip. Like
chips and dips, you can't go wrong. All right, if we were to check your playlist, what's a music that we would find?
I have a wide variety. Everything from a little Shaggy to If I Were a Fish, just kind of fun, folky, hip hop together kind of music. So a wide variety of stuff. But
love it. What about a favorite movie or TV show that you've seen recently?
My favorite TV show, embarrassingly, I watch Young and the Restless every day because my grandmother and my mother watched it with me when I was little. But like favorite all time would have to be This Is Us. I love that show. I love that movie or that TV show.
I think you're going to have a lot of people nodding their head on both of those. So then we're recording this in a little bit of an Arctic freeze time. So a lot of people are thinking, boy, I'd want to be somewhere warmer. If you could be whisked away to a vacation destination, where would it be?
Definitely Hawaii. We lived there for 3 years. Owen has one of my sons has his middle name is Hawaiian because we found out we were pregnant with him right after we moved back there. So anytime that I can ever go someplace beautiful and tropical, I'm going to go back to my second home. So
there you go. When recording this, some people are experiencing single digits or wind chills below zero. So Hawaii, we can all put that image in our heads. I love it. All right. Well, for folks who haven't met you, tell us, the short version of your life story. How did you get into this world in the beginning, many years, and then your sort of second experience with that?
Well, I grew up babysitting and doing all that fun jazz. I got the privilege of babysitting for one of my little cousins who has Down syndrome. He's now an adult. He's well into his late 30s. And I knew at that point that was it for me. I wanted to, if I was going to be a teacher, that was my genre, was special ed. So got diverted a little bit, coached college volleyball for a couple of years after I played at University of Louisville. But still, when it came back to it, I wanted to be a teacher. So when it was time to settle down and be a mom with my oldest one, I went back and got my education degree and started teaching and still had that strong desire to teach special ed. That was 20 years ago. About 9 years ago, 10 years ago, my husband was retiring from the Navy and I needed to make more money. But also there was a huge need for special ed administrators with that background and that passion, that understanding. So jumped into the admin pool very reluctantly, but God gave me a big shove in there. It's been fantastic ever since. So getting to where I am, I taught special ed, I guess, for about 12 years. And now I'm on year 9 of being a principal. And so that's how I got to where I am in my educational journey. And the kids that learn different, that see different, that live in the world different, be there, have IEPs or not, those are just my people. I struggled as a student growing up. Nowadays, I would have an IEP. I know what it feels like to be lost. I know what it feels like to look at the kids inside the classroom in 3rd grade and say, when did they learn that multiplication, that song where they're doing 2 times 2? Because I don't remember that. I'm sure I was there, but I don't remember it. Yeah. So I know how that feels. So it was easy to relate to those kids. Then now we were blessed 7 years ago with a beautiful little guy. His name's Owen. And we have gone through the whole autism journey. He's nonverbal. He is hilarious and strong-willed, and the most opinionated nonverbal person I've ever met in my life. And I've met a lot of nonverbal people, so I tell my husband all the time that's not a light statement because I know quite a few. But and it's taken me on to a completely different level of understanding. I was a good special ed teacher. I got it as much as I could. Now, whew, whole new ball game of understanding what that's like, stepping onto that other side of the table with the knowledge of what it feels like to be on both sides now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a humbling and educational experience all the time for me.
Oh yeah, and we're going to delve into that a lot. So one question I don't think I prepared you for is just back in those first 12 years, what did you love most about being a special ed teacher? Or what do you still love about the work and the people you now work with?
My favorite thing about being a special ed teacher was just the level that I got to know my kids, the level that I got to know their parents, and feeling like I was making, especially now looking back at it, I feel like I made it a little more accessible and understanding. Like I met them where they were, and then I got to hang out and meet some of the coolest people. The kids that other people maybe shied away from, that I got to forge those relationships, and I think that's my favorite part is just that connection and that closeness that I would get with my kids that I wouldn't see my other teachers getting because of that lack of that amount of trust that the students and the families have to put in their special ed teachers. And that to me, I think is the biggest joy that I bring away from it.
So 7 years ago, when Owen came into the world, that was a little bit of a curveball you weren't expecting. And we talk with a lot of parents about that acceptance journey, kind of like how do you process all those feelings, all those emotions, all those thoughts, maybe that spiral of worry about their future. What was that part of the journey like for you? And looking back in it, what advice do you have? You probably had advice before for parents on the acceptance, but now being one, how did it maybe enhance that advice on the acceptance piece?
Well, before Owen, I thought I knew. I thought, oh, I can help these parents with this. This is just a diagnosis. And I'm going to tell you, after Owen, I cringe at the fact that I would ever say this is just a diagnosis. It's just information. I think looking back at that girl sitting there, I want to say, oh my gosh, as Jackie Diaz with Owen at this age, I'm going to be as PG as I can be with it, but I'm like, you.
It's a podcast. You can say what you want.
Because it's a big deal. I remember sitting in Indianapolis. He was about 3.5. We'd gone up there for a second hearing evaluation. And he came into that evaluation and he showed all of the things that he was incapable of doing and refused to do any of the things he was capable of and climbed on every surface and did everything that said, hey, look at me, I'm autistic. And we hadn't gotten that diagnosis yet. I was going up there hoping for a deaf and hard of hearing diagnosis because I knew how to do that. And sitting at that table when they said, well, it's not the deaf and hard of hearing that's impeding his learning. He was sitting on my lap and I was holding him so tight. And I felt so far away from him and so close to him and so protective of him. 1,000 emotions with this human that I know better than anybody else knows, sitting on my lap. And I mean, the ride home from Indianapolis, feeling disconnected and connected and protective all at the same time. And it was so confusing. Because what does that mean for when we grow up? Does that mean he's going to live with me forever? Oh my gosh, I'm in my 40s. I don't want somebody living with me. I don't want my husband living with me forever, really. Does this mean I'm not going to get to go to Cabo with my friends and do this? What does it mean for him? Does this, so all the selfish stuff came in, and then what does it mean for him? Like what about when I'm gone, and where is he going to live, and what's going to happen, and what's he going to look like? And and I had to push the pause button, because I can't, you can't do that because you don't know. And if you sit there and you go down this wormhole of you don't know, then it's going to eat you alive. So at that moment, during that time, I took some deep breaths and I said, I can't do the rest of his life right now. I don't want to do the rest of his life right now. Let's look at what's next. What's next is I take this evaluation and I put it in a drawer and I share it with his teachers. And I look at my baby and I say, what's next? And that's what we did. And that's what we've been doing ever since is, okay, that's information. Now what's next? Yes, that information changed things.
Yeah.
It did not change my son. It didn't change how I feel about him. It didn't change that I'm his biggest advocate, but it changed a lot. It changed what my next was. Because my next wasn't what it was with my 23-year-old.
Right.
My next wasn't familiar. It wasn't something that I knew where to put my hands. It was something that I was going to have to fumble through and figure out. And that's not a comfortable place. You know, as administrators, we're kind of bossy and always know and take charge. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know where to go. So it was a lot of education and coming to the place that if that's the worst case scenario, that the kid who I ask, who's your best friend, who's mommy's best friend, and he says he is, if that's the worst case scenario, then that's a pretty great worst case scenario. He's going to live with me forever. I'm going to have somebody to go to Cabo with me.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that, I think that day was a pivotal day that I don't talk about much.
Yeah.
It was the start of my acceptance that there might be something different and unique and special about Owen that I'm going to have to figure out and swim through. I look at our acceptance journey, his life journey, as a level of like if I'm in the Mall of America and I get to the food court and I'm like, oh, look, we're at the food court, but I want to eat the tacos that are up on the next level. So, all right, let's figure this out and let's get to that next level so we can get the tacos. So we get to a level of acceptance, but then there's always something else. There's always that next, like everybody else is playing soccer. That's great. Does it hurt a little bit that he's not? Yeah. But hey, what's next for him? And as long as I focus on what's next for him, it helps me. It helps me figure this out. And I'm never going to say that it's easy because I'm sitting here saying, oh, we just focus on what's next. No, there's crying. There's mostly the shower. There's stress about it. There's anxiety that keeps me up. My heart rate goes up, all that fun stuff. But when I come back to it, it's okay, what are our next steps? What do we do next? And that's what keeps me moving forward on our journey with this. So I think that would be a big piece of advice that I would give is take your time to break down, feel it. Don't feel guilty about it because there's nobody that loves that kid more than I do. Could I sit and do I sometimes have guilt about it? Yeah. About the fact that I cry about it and that even though I say he's perfect, why does it make me sad then that we don't have some of these milestones? Because I'm a human and I'm gonna allow myself to be a human and feel those things. But I can't stop at that. And so it's what's next for Owen because Owen deserves his mom to do that. And Owen deserves his mom to do that in life and school and everything else. And that's if I'm going to take care of him, that's what he deserves. So.
Well, thank you. That's a really open and honest assessment. And like you said, it's you feel the feelings and then you kind of have the guilt for feeling them. So all those things. What's next is usually figuring out what is next, right? And kind of building that education, that support, those people around you, often referred to as like building your village. So and you obviously came at this with a little bit different background and perspective than your average Joan or Jack. So what was building the village like for you?
Well, I'm very blessed. I have my mom and my dad were very active. My husband is there. And we also had a 15-year-old at the time. But I guess around his diagnosis, Kobe was like 18 or 19. Um, so we had some natural people in our life, my family, my brothers and sisters, and extended people. So we had some of that naturally built in there. But then my willingness to be vulnerable with my coworkers, because they're the experts in this. I mean, I work with some pretty amazing people that are autism experts and IEP, like they know how to implement IEPs, they know what to ask for, they know. So to use those people that I had in my life and not be afraid to use them, um, and not to be afraid to pull back my curtain, even though I like to keep my curtain around Owen and keep him real safe. Um, so I think building my Owen's village was finding those people and then allowing myself to be vulnerable, because I'm not good at that. And so leaning into it instead of drawing back from it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And even leaning into the hard things that I don't want to share. A friend of mine has been through a pretty tragic situation this past spring.
Mm.
And we were sitting on the back porch, and they said, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know what the rest of my life looks like. And I shared with them about what I shared earlier about Owen, that I would go into this, I could go into the spiral in this because I don't know what his future looks like. And she said, well, what do you do? And I'm like, I stop. And then she started crying and she said, you never told me. And this is one of my very, very good friends. I mean, who loves Owen, who carried him around for the first year of his life at basketball games. And she said, I never knew, you always seemed so okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a moment that we both realized we got to lean into each other too. And it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to be vulnerable with people that you have that are safe. So finding those safe people that you know you can lean into when it's hard and that are gonna help. So that was the other way, is finding those people that I know. So
I love that. It's okay to be not okay. And you know, for a person who's not very good at being vulnerable, you're sharing your story on a podcast. So give yourself some credit.
I am very aware of that.
And I appreciate it. And I
I
know
told
our
my
audience.
principal today, I said, for a person who doesn't open up the curtain, I'm like, hey.
Here we go. You're on a podcast. Hello, world. Here I am. Well, that's really good advice about it. And like you said, blessed with those people around you. One thing that comes up sometimes for people is those closest to you, you know, they're helping, they're showing up in different ways. And did you have any experience? Sometimes a lot of parents have this dynamic of like, some people don't show up in the way you hoped they might, and your feelings about that, and maybe learning to process through people not being there quite in the way you expected them to be.
I do have that, absolutely. I have a couple of, especially friends, that I thought would be there for everything, and haven't been. At first, I was angry with them,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I felt abandoned. Um, but through a few conversations and through some understanding, one, I found out, not everybody's just sitting there worried about me. Um, and that some of the reasons why they weren't showing up didn't have anything to do with me.
Right.
It's that they had a lot of crap going on too.
Sure.
And then two, sometimes they didn't know what to say. They didn't know, like, one of my friends said, I want to play with them, I just don't know how. I know how to interact with a kiddo that'll look at me and talk to me and play, but I don't know how. And to me, that was one of the most beautiful moments that I've had with a family member of mine, is that her vulnerability to say that to me. It deepened our relationship,
Yeah.
because I thought, and she said, I hope you're not mad at me. I'm like, I am amazed. I want to hug you right now. And I did hug her. I said, thank you for asking. And thank you for, she said, well, I was afraid because I didn't want you to think I didn't love him. I just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so we went out to dinner a couple times with her, just Owen and her, and it's my sister-in-law, and she's amazing. So I mean, I want to give her, actually, I'm like not saying her name, but her name's Marie, and she's fantastic.
Yeah.
And her openness and willingness to say that to me. And then we went out to dinner and she spent time, and now they have a beautiful relationship. He loves his Aunt Ree. He calls her Ree and he runs up to him, plays. but it was her willingness to be vulnerable with that. So that showed me that sometimes it is because they just don't know and they
Right.
want to do better, but they're afraid to ask you because they don't want to hurt your feelings either.
Yeah,
And so it's giving people a chance.
absolutely. Well, your wheelhouse is school, and the educational journey for parents is a big part of this path. So let's talk a little bit about your experience, maybe your aha moment when you sat on the other side of the table, dealing as a parent, not just as an educator. And from that, some of your biggest takeaways that you'd give advice, maybe both for parents, but even for educators, like what did this dual experience teach you that you can share with us?
I'm going to start with educators because I think that I want to say this nicely. I think the majority of educators want to do the right thing, and they
Absolutely.
know all the parameters of what we have. Now, I'm not going to say that there aren't shysters out there that aren't in this for the right ideas. So don't get me wrong on that. And you always have to have your spidey sense up for that. But the majority of educators and the people that I know in my world want to do right by your student. So educators, I'm going to tell you to slow down. Slow down in your meetings, slow down in your agenda, and listen. We get into our IEP meetings or ARC meetings or SBD or I don't know, whatever different state calls them. And we start talking all of our teacher jumbo, and then we're going through, and then we're making big decisions and talking about other people's kids, um, and talking really fast and around them. So stop and ask, hey, do you know what that means? Or I wouldn't have known what that meant if I didn't take this class. Let me explain that to you. Um, so that would be my biggest piece of advice to the educators is slow down and get everybody on the ship with you before you start muddling it off. And then make sure and know that the parents and that child are what this meeting's about, not your agenda and not what you need to happen. Um, then along those same lines with that, offer the best thing that you can offer to them and know that it's going to need to be modified. And because I know that we live in a world of education that's not perfect. And even like as a parent, I know that what my child needs isn't just in a big, beautiful gift box sitting there waiting and they're just not giving it to me. That there are so many variables that it takes. So as an administrator, as a school personnel, make sure that you're trying your best to get to that big, beautiful gift box for that kid. And treat them and think about them like if it was your child sitting there. As a parent, I'm going to tell you to never stop searching. Never stop researching, never stop. If it's something feels weird, question it. If you think that your child can do more, push it. Don't accept the answer of this is all we have. So if that's the answer of this is what we can offer, then find someplace else that can offer more. It may be hard. It will be hard. We're in the middle of some of that journey right now. But keep searching because if you don't search, then who's going to? I know Owen, we went to preschool in a great preschool program, public school. It was fantastic. Love Miss Carrie. He was supposed to have one teacher in kindergarten for a developmental kindergarten. Got there, the teacher had stayed home with children. Nobody had told us. I mean, there was a lot of who's its and what's its that didn't happen at open house. Wasn't feeling it. And it wasn't because of anything big that happened or whatever. It just didn't feel right to me. So I didn't send him to school. I called and luckily because I'm an administrator, I called our director of special ed up here in my school system and I said, I don't know what to do. I am sobbing and she said, we got you. And Owen is now in a school up here and he's doing really well. But even within that school, I don't think he's getting what he needs, and it's not their fault. Um, so I'm still questioning, and we're going to actually be going next week after next for an evaluation up in Ohio at Oakstone Academy, and we're gonna do a summer program there. It's gonna cost us a boatload of money, and I don't know, maybe I'll sell some more plasma or something, but we'll figure it out. Because I can't let any of that get in the way of what he needs. And if I stop asking what's next, if I stop asking, is this enough, then we're in trouble. So that's my biggest piece to you is, or to parents is, keep asking and keep seeking if you don't find it. Because your window there is so important, and you have to be the one driving that bus. The other piece is don't be railroaded in a meeting. You know, say slow down. I don't know what you just said. That does not make sense to me. Explain that to me. Explain it to me like I'm 5. Because in those meetings, this should be a partnership. You should be able to ask questions. They should be able to ask questions, and you all should have that open dialogue in your meeting. So don't be afraid that you're going to sound dumb, for lack of a better word.
Sure.
Ask the question. Ask the ridiculous question. Ask the why not. So you're saying that we can't do this. Why not? Well, what is the step that we can get closer to that then? Like, if Owen would be great, he would do a lot better if he had a 1-to-1 all day. That's not reasonable. That's not a reasonable thing for me to ask. A 1-to-1 all day in a gen ed classroom, it's not a reasonable financial thing to ask. So my question is, what is the thing that can get us the closest to that? And then we found a happy medium. Some of his service providers take him into the gen ed classes, and we have kind of a blended thing going on there. So he does, like, I think his deaf and hard of hearing teacher goes in and takes him in. His speech teacher sometimes takes him in and spends service times with him in there. So we found a blended way to get him more time with a 1-to-1 and more time in the gen ed classroom with a 1-to-1. But if I would have just taken, well, we can't do a 1-to-1, then he'd still be sitting in self-contained without the 1-to-1 services or without the services in class. So find as many ways as you can do that, because I do understand, like, not everybody can say, well, I'm just going to go pay thousands of dollars for him to go to school. So find a way that you can get closest to the good, better, best, kind of concept. In schools, we say, oh, this is good, this would be better, this would be best. Get as close to best as you can, but ask those questions. So.
Yeah, I love that idea of, like, if you ask for something and say, well, that's not possible, what can we do that gets us as closer to that?
Yeah.
What
And
advice would you have for parents who are, just starting out and they're not as familiar with how this all works, about their research, even before they get to an IEP, to kind of prepare themselves for what to expect?
well, I think that it's really hard. It's really hard to know and walk into something that you've never experienced. I've sat through thousands of IEP meetings. I'm going to tell you, I cried the entire first IEP meeting that we had.
When you were on the other side of the table.
Yeah, as a parent.
And what about that struck you so much?
It talked about everything he can't do.
Ah.
And that was just really hard, because I know all the things he can't do.
Right.
So you have to be prepared for that, to hear the hard things.
And what did that feel like, just hearing over and over? I guess it's a different perspective when you're an educator. Obviously, you're focusing on deficits and areas that need to be improved. So it's like A, B, C, and D, and E, and F, and G. But when you're hearing it, what did that feel like for you?
Just wanted to yell, like, I know what he can't do. What are you going to do to fix it? Stop talking to me about what he can't do and tell me what we're going to do to fix it. Because it was just very overwhelming, and it was very discouraging.
Yeah.
Because he's so much more than the things he can't do. And I'm so protective of this human. And now you're just going to sit here and, like, bash him?
Right.
So shifting my paradigm to get out of that mindset for myself, that's not what they were trying to do in the meeting. And I never thought that, but it can feel that way.
Right. Yeah.
And
Knowing what it is and feeling are two different things.
Right. But so I think my advice would be, one, no. what's going on, what's going to happen in that meeting, by asking questions. I mean, a lot of times schools will have parents that are willing to talk to new special ed parents. Like I know if a parent asked me, I would be able to give them, I'd say, can I give your contact information to this family or this family? And then you kind of have a guide by your side. You also have different groups out there. I laugh because I say guide by your side. There's a group down here in the Southern Indiana area that we found online through Facebook, and they've got their line something like guide by your side, but you can go and talk on forums and find out from other parents, like, hey, what does this look like? How does that feel? And make connections that way. Meet other people that are going through the same thing you're going through,
Yeah.
and ask those questions. I know there's a couple good ones, like Finding Cooper's Voice is a big one that I follow. Putting questions out on some trusted forums with people that are doing it about, hey, I was thinking about this for an IEP. What are you guys thinking? Is that too much? How would I ask for this? But then also finding what your local district is using for the IEP, or your local district or state is using for IEPs. I know different states have adopted some districts adopt different ones. So find out what the document is that they use. Ask for it. Ask for a blank copy of one. Look at your parent rights. I know we kind of laugh whenever we're presenting them because they're like, you want to read these, and it's a book of parental rights. But take some time to peruse it. Let your best friend that likes to read it, and give you the highlights if you don't like to read. Or you struggle with some of the language, find a friend who can read it well to you. Because I know I struggle with the legal language of it. My husband's good at that stuff because he does contracts all day. So I had him read some of it to say, hey, what does this say? What is that? So find somebody that can help. But ask questions, ask people that know. And ask people that have been in your seat.
Yeah.
Because the more that you go into, the more that you know when you go in, the easier that it can be in many ways. And then always go into it knowing that this is something that you're doing for your child. This isn't something that's happening to your kid. This isn't something that is happening to your family. This is one of those what's next steps to get your child what they need.
Yeah.
And you've got to look at it through the lens of, okay, what's next? Instead of, oh my, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And it can be both of those things at the same time. Don't get me wrong.
We talk often a lot about the things that you should do. You've probably also experienced some things that you shouldn't do watching it, where the meetings kind of get a little derailed. What would you say are the pitfalls to avoid that parents might do not knowing, but it's a good way to not have a great partnership?
Well, I would say go into every meeting with assuming positive intentions until you find otherwise.
Okay.
Don't go into the meeting assuming that this is going to be a battle and that they don't care about your kid and that they're just there to screw you all over. Don't go into the meeting with that attitude, because if you do, then it's going to automatically make everybody tense up, and then you're not going to have that open dialogue that you need to have of what's best for your son or your daughter. So that would be my number one don't come in ready to fight.
Right.
Come in with your idea about this is what I need. And so it's not a fight, it's a compromise about how we're going to get here for what our kid needs. And if we're working together on it, it's going to happen. Now, that doesn't mean to be a pushover and say, oh, whatever. But come in with that open-minded, like assuming positive intentions that everybody in that room wants what's best for your kid. Nobody more than you, but that we're going to find a way to do this instead of coming in angry or ready to fight or defensive. Now, if they've given you reason to be, have a conversation about that directly. Hey, at our last IEP meeting, I really feel like we had this conflict. How can we address that and make that better? Or I feel like there's a lot of tension between it. So I know I had without divulging too much information, I had a family at one of my schools that wanted the child to be retained in 5th grade. The school administration did not want to do it. As the head of their committee, I was going to ask for the retention. They trusted me, the parents did, and so we were able to have that conversation. Now they were ready to fight, but they were going to let me fight that battle in a tempered and appropriate way. We ended up getting to retain the child. We had great evidence to do so. It took me having to walk out of the meeting with the parents, but they knew that I was on their side. So having that conversation with the trusted person going in, if you are feeling some tension about a committee or some committee members, and then talking through about how you would manage that. And that's something this family did with me. And in the end, this child has flourished and done really well. But they deserve that. And that was my thing, was this child deserves this second year in this program. But I knew the words to say better than they did. And I was an agent on both sides. So finding that piece too to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think your perspective is so helpful because, like you said, you did it for years. You were a passionate special ed teacher. You were a passionate administrator working with a team of passionate people, all trying to do their best. But then when you sat on the other side of the table, you're like, oh, this is what it feels like from this side. It's totally different. So you bring, like I said, a really unique perspective. It's so helpful to share. As we get ready to wrap up, because I am nothing if not the time Nazi with this podcast, if you had to give some kind of overarching keys to success, especially could be the parenting journey or especially the partnering with your school part of it, what would be your one or two best pieces of advice that you've learned through your journey?
Right. My number one piece would be, don't be afraid to lean into it, even when it hurts. One of the things I'm doing today with you guys is leaning into it, even when it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That there are things that aren't going to be fun that you're going to come up against, and things that you're not going to want to admit and lean into. But do it because your kid deserves it. Don't avoid it just because it's hard or hard for you. And I know that sounds like, oh, well, of course you do that. You're a parent. No, parenting special needs kids is different. There's a different amount of pride that comes in with it yeah. And so lean into it. That would be my biggest thing for parents. Know that it's a journey, and that it's going to be easy and it's going to be hard on days. And that's a place where parenting, typical and non-typical, is very similar. But know that it's going to be hard, but it's also going to be beautiful. And make sure that when it's beautiful that you snuggle in that.
Yeah.
And then third is choose to see the awesomeness that your kid is. I know I have bruises on my arm and I have a pinch right here. We had a rough night last night. I think I have one back here too. He didn't have a rough night. He had a rough 20 minutes. So choose to not forget that it was only a rough 20 minutes, and the rest of yesterday and the day before and everything else in between was great. So don't let that burden you. Because it's hard, but it's also amazing. And I look forward to retiring and being a stay-at-home adult autism mom. Because there's so many, the coolest, again, the last thing that I could say about this is, if the worst thing that happens is that I get to live with Owen for the rest of my life, that's some cool shit. I mean, that's
pretty cool.
He's a little honored, but he's cool. So, I mean, always remembering that.
Well, we are honored that you chose to lean in to the uncomfortable moments and share your journey with us. I know a lot of listeners are going to enjoy this. Who knows, you're a podcast guest now, kind of thinking you might be a conference speaker or something sometime down the road. You're going to get some requests from this. We're going to have to hire an agent or something. So if you were listening today and you enjoyed this, which I know lots of you did, we would love your ideas for future podcast guests. We would love your feedback. And we would love for this podcast to not become a best kept secret. We know a lot of parents would enjoy our goal. My goal with this podcast, really three. One is education. Every time we do an episode, you're going to learn something that you can take away. Two is some days are tough and we all need motivation. So hopefully you hear an episode, a guest like ours today, and that's going to get you onto that next step. And then last, but certainly not least, we want this podcast to be another layer of your community, that you come here because the people here get you and you're nodding your head as you're listening to today's episode. And we know other parents could benefit from that. So please go to our Facebook page if you haven't done so yet. Like the podcast, follow the podcast, and then share the episodes as they get posted with people. Now, I do 2 a month right now, and my second episode is always a nonprofit. So if you know great nonprofits doing good work in this space, we would love your recommendations. Jackie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.